FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
This episode of the Financial Survival Network is brought to you in part by Sandstorm Gold Royalties. Sandstorm Gold Royalties is a different kind of gold company. They purchase royalties on select mining operations and receive a percentage of the revenue in return. Sandstorm now has a portfolio of over 185 gold royalties around the world. See how gold royalties differ from other gold mining investments at sandstormgold.com. That's sandstormgold.com. Sandstorm Gold Royalties trades on the TSX as SSL and on the New York Stock Exchange American as SAND.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network, and I'm Kerry Lutz. Well, as we go by, a wise person I know wrote a series of articles that said the theme of which was why we are ungovernable. And certainly nothing that's happened recently should give you any reason to think otherwise. Hey, but first, as always, we urge you to write the show and join us. The email address, as you well know, is kl@kerrylutz.com. So Ungovernability, the person who should write a book about it, is with us now, John Rubino. John, good morning. And don't forget, his site is dollarcollapse.com.
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, the economy is kind of boring right now, and the stock market is very boring all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But politics are fun, and becoming more so.
It depends on your definition of the word fun. I find them completely frustrating and irritating and annoying because you can't really have a political discussion in this day and age. All you can have is a political battle, a confrontation, even with your closest friends and family, because they are mostly immune to fact-driven approach.
Well, yeah, we are dividing into 2 very separate camps now, with not much of a middle in between to cut deals with. But that's in terms of political theater. I think this is a unique time, and I'm kind of, I have to say, enjoying it. But with a lot of this stuff, you always have to have the caveat that if it doesn't spin out of control and people don't start dying, this is fun. But, we're not that far from that, really. And I think you can trace it back. Well, you can trace it much further back, but it begins, for our purposes, with the election of Donald Trump, who proved that you can pretty much say anything these days. You don't have to control your rhetoric because there's no political penalty, or just speaking your mind, no matter what crazy thing you're thinking in the moment. Go ahead and let it out, and you've got an audience that appreciates it. So Trump got elected by saying what used to be considered crazy stuff, and now on the Republican side is kind of mainstream rhetoric, and the Democrats were really jealous for a while because they were still in the Obama/Clinton rhetorical mode, which is to measured language that hides your true intentions a lot of the time. But this new batch of Republicans or of Democrats that are coming into Congress don't have that problem. They got elected on basically the Trump rhetorical platform, where you say what you actually think.
Yeah. And
if you're a full-on democratic socialist, you call yourself that. You can use the S word now. And if you think tax rates ought to be 70% or higher, you can say that. And there's a constituency out there that applauds your honesty and who buys into the idea to begin with. So now you've got this one congresswoman who came in and on cameras and in front of an audience called Trump a really vile name and said, right, let's impeach yes, and got away with it. 5 years ago, even if you'd done something like that, you would have been out on your ear. Your political career would have been over. And this probably gave her a nice bump in the national polls.
Yeah.
So everybody else has learned the lesson from that.
Yeah.
And they now feel free to say anything they want to. So we've got, first of all, we've got a situation where Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who used to be the flaming radicals of the Democrat Party, seem kind of quaint. They seem so old school that you can't even call them radical anymore. And second of all, we're entering a period that you could probably call the verbal part of the coming civil war, where people are free to say anything they want to, and what they're saying is really extreme,
vile,
and becoming more extreme because Trump loves this. This is his territory. So anything anybody says to him, he will come back with something that's a lot worse and probably pretty witty. The Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas thing is a good example.
Well, you see, that's what's missing from the left. There's no humor or witticism in the left's commentary. They'll say anything, but Trump had a purpose in saying it.
Yeah, he uses extreme satire as a way to to pin his political opponents down. Like Elizabeth Warren was clearly the major contender next time around to run against Trump, but this Pocahontas thing made her look silly to enough people that now she's just part of the pack. She's running and she's not out of it, but she's got this baggage that's going to be hard to carry forward. And Trump is really good about that, identifying the thing that makes somebody look silly and trivial and then repeating it over and over again until it becomes their defining trait in a lot of people's minds. And that's effective. I mean, at least in the short run. You could make the case that in the long run, we pay a price for treating each other that way. But we're apparently not worried about the long run right now. We're worried about scoring rhetorical points in the moment. And that's now the game out there. And, don't sell Democrats short in terms of satire and humor. They got a lot of funny people out there. Jon Stewart was by far the funniest political satirist in the world when he was around. And he was a socialist. He was far to the left. But he took over for Rush Limbaugh as the funniest satirist. And so the Democrats have a lot of people like that. And once they get going, this is going to be a full-on rhetorical, satirical war. And you just have to hope that it doesn't bleed over into the physical. We really don't want all this funny stuff that's being tossed around to turn into riots. But we're not far from that. We've already seen some where, in Charlottesville and in, of all places, Portland, Oregon, we had the left and the right in street battles. And we really don't want that to happen, So to be amused by the political rhetoric right now that's how I see it. I think it's funny at the moment, but you always have to remember that there's a big risk in today's world that this stuff metastasizes into something that's a lot more serious. And we have to hope that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, as it's said, I've heard it said before, we're in a cold civil war, meaning people aren't up in arms yet. I think the left has been way more violent than the right. You just had to go look at those anti-Trump protests during the election, the fact that the DNC was paying off people to go to Trump rallies and get violent on camera to make them look, like crazy, reactionaries. And, as far as the left with their sense of humor, if you watch any late night television show, the first 15 minutes or 15 jokes, whichever comes first, are all Trump, 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 Trump. And they're not like particularly funny anymore. I think there's a lot about Trump to make fun of. I think he's got a lot of quirks and a lot of eccentricities that you could be funny about. But now it's like watching an Academy Award show, the Golden Globes, or the MTV Awards. And it's not really about humor. It's about making political points. And the humor is purely incidental if it exists at all. So, yes, Jon Stewart, master satirist, but really, how much of that can you take? It's like, it just...
The problem with making fun of Trump now is that it's a really crowded market. How do you come up with new jokes when you've got, like you said, you've got 20 people out there telling Trump jokes, which means because of oversupply, the average quality of a Trump joke is going downhill. Yeah, because there's just so many people trying to find funny things to say about Trump. And the good, funny ideas are taken right away. Yeah. But if you've got time to fill and you've got to make fun of Trump, you have no choice but to put some low quality material out there. And that's what's happening. That kind of works to the Republicans' advantage because, as you said, if the jokes aren't funny, that rebounds on the comic, right? And you lose credibility as a comic. If what you're saying is political but not funny, then the political point kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And that's another advantage of Trump's right now.
Yeah, well,
that won't last, because the other Republicans are worth making fun of too. So as
for sure.
they emerge, then there's more material out there.
All the politicians are worthy of satire. That's why satire emerged. I was watching a documentary biopic about Johnny Carson, and at one point, was it Mike Wallace, the guy from 60 Minutes, is interviewing Carson and said, you never really get political. Why is that? And he said, because anytime you get political, you lose 50% of your audience. So now, because we're so micro-segmented and markets so niche marketed, they don't care about losing 50% of their market in any artistic undertaking. And because seeing a lot of different entertainment content, it's just like the right isn't really out there producing all this stuff. If they do, it's some kind of Christian movie, but it's not necessarily political. But the left is like political, like saw this movie Ocean's 8. Okay. So it was Sandra Bullock. She's the mastermind as opposed to being a guy. And all of the guys in the movie are stupid. All of the women are brilliant, stellar performers, overachievers. And this is just Hollywood getting their thing out about that men are stupid, the attack on so-called toxic masculinity. Hey, well, what happened to toxic feminism here? That's far more toxic than masculinity. Hey, should women be treated fairly, whether at home in the workplace? For sure. Nobody's arguing about that. But that doesn't warrant an attack on the very essence of masculinity, and yet that's what they do.
Well, you could make the case that women have had to put up with the, the little woman, the fairer sex, the weaker sex kind of stuff for ever since there's been media. So they're just getting a little of theirs back right now. And I completely get that it's about time there was some equity in the media. Because if you just look at, have you ever seen those commercials and ads that could never be on TV? There's a lot of that floating around online. And if you look at some of the ads that used to appear back in the 1950s and 60s were insanely sexist. And we got away with that as guys, So I don't mind seeing women get away with a little bit of that same stuff just to balance things out. But yeah, at some point
we're past that.
Yeah, we need to get past it where the gender or the skin color of somebody doesn't automatically define their characteristics otherwise. So you got smart, strong women, which is that's a genre now. The kick-ass girl is an actual conceptual screenwriter's device, right? You put one of those in because everybody wants to see one in any screenplay. And that's okay, I think. And I think the way pendulums work societally is they swing too far in one direction and too far in the other direction, but eventually make their way to the middle. And we'll get there in the media. But what's happening right now in politics is that we're diverging so dramatically that depending on what media outlet you're looking at, you see a completely different world than on other media outlets. If you go to MSNBC, you would think that the biggest thing happening on Earth in the past 100 years is the Russia investigation, right? If you go to Fox News, you don't even hear about it. Or if you do hear about it, it's made fun of as something that's trivial and completely politically motivated. And which of those is true? We won't know until the investigation produces some results.
Even then, I don't think we'll ever know.
Could be.
I think the evidence is coming out that this whole investigation was a setup of some sort. And, it just appears that the dossier, GHQ, and the Australian intelligence, the setup of infiltration of the Trump campaign, and these FISA warrants apparently weren't done in good faith. As far as the rest of it goes, I can't say whether Trump is a Russian agent or troll or whatever, but I can say that the investigation of him was not made in good faith and arguably was part of a pre-election and post-election coup effort. that's what it appears when you see these the testimony of Lisa Page coming out, and of the fact it wasn't just Carter Page, it was multiple Trump campaign people that they got FISA warrants on, and they set these guys up, sent trolls to the campaign trying to get them to incriminate themselves. It was pretty obvious this happened. So,
here's the big problem with these special investigations. And I get the concept, because you can't have the Justice Department investigate the president who's in charge of the Justice Department, right? That doesn't work. So you do at times need to bring in somebody from the outside who's at least theoretically neutral to do an investigation. But the way they work is they go in with one objective, and then they start arresting people for all kinds of unrelated things. That happened under the Clinton impeachment investigation, and now it's happening with Trump, where they're nailing his guys for stuff like bank fraud that had nothing to do with collusion with the Russians, and that seems like the kind of thing that would keep you from wanting to work in government. Yeah. If you have anything in your background that could look dodgy in any way, which is to say, every single guy who's ever run a campaign or who has ever helped out with finances for rich people or anything like that, there's always something that somebody could find. So in the era of special investigations like this, it's hard to imagine anybody wanting to work for a president, because you never know if there's going to be some completely unrelated scandal that ends up with somebody coming to you and say, back in 1969, did you actually sign this document that turned out to be, and here you've got to go back and through your memory and see if you actually did it. And it maybe ends up kind of looking bad, and you maybe end up being indicted for something that is completely unrelated. I don't know. I just, it seems like giving these guys the scope to start with one thing and then branch out in any direction they want to is just dangerous and messy, and it shouldn't happen. When you have a independent investigator, they should go after the single charge that led to them being in that position in the first place, and leave the other stuff go. Yeah.
That's logical, and that's what you're supposed to investigate a crime that's been committed and trace it back to the people who committed it. You're not supposed to investigate the people in search of a crime that you don't even know about until you start investigating. And many times, like it's been said, it's process crimes where somebody accidentally said something they didn't mean to, or said something wrong, and they wind up in a perjury trap. And that's what the Justice Department does best. It seems, in these special investigations, with these special counsels. And, Robert Mueller's got a very checkered past, very controversial, and a lot of people don't see him as, lily white in this matter. They see him as a very corrupt former member of the FBI. And the leftist sees him as a burst of sunlight. The right sees him as somebody who's there to cover up all the crimes that were committed by his agency, by the FBI and the CIA and all the intelligence agencies. They see him as the person, he's the cleanup crew, clean up on aisle 5, right? That's his job. And arguably, I can see the point. That's kind of my point in an oblique way, which is that you take anybody who's had a big life that's involved government and law enforcement and business, and you can always point to something in their past that you could use against them if they're in a position where you could do that. And Mueller's no exception to that rule. I mean, if you go back through his stuff or his life, maybe you find some stuff that calls into question his credibility. But I think that's true of literally everybody at that level of government, because by the time you've had that big of a life, there's some questionable stuff in there. Some deals had to be made. Got it. And Obama, interestingly, he skated. He didn't have any big scandals or anything, but he came up through the most corrupt political machine in the country in Chicago, right?
So I think if we dug through his past, even though I'm not in any way criticizing him in particular, I'm just saying that even Obama, if we put him under that kind of a spotlight, would end up having some stuff that made him look bad.
He had Fast and Furious. He had Fast and Furious, the gun running scandal. He had the IRS scandal. The scandals were there. They were just never publicized by the media because the media is no longer independent. They're an appendage of the system. You know, they might be independent against Trump, but they certainly weren't independent with Obama. Nothing adverse came out about the media, from the media, about Obama virtually during both terms, but there was plenty of scandalous things. There was Solyndra. There was just... They just go on and on
that was
and on.
Stuff while he was president. But what I'm saying is that in his past, if he ended up being the attorney general or something like that, and there was a special investigation and on some other subject, they could have ended up looking into his past in Chicago, and I bet they would have found some stuff. He came up under all these governors who are now in prison, so he cut some deals.
And the Choom Gang and all of that. I mean, if you just have to go back far enough, everybody's got dirt. Anyway, John, we got to wrap it up. Make sure you go check out John's work at dollarcollapse.com. Check us out at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Please like, share, subscribe to our various channels. And while you're at it, share it with somebody and get the word out. It helps us a lot when you get the show out there and you share it with people. It really helps build the audience and helps us get information out to as many people as possible. John, we will catch you next week.
Thanks, Kerry. See ya.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.